I know now why the Pied Piper on stage has young fools dancing to his chants. He is soft like tender dew. He is sweet like the first downpour in my hometown. He is committed like my grandmother industriously weaving my braid. He is patient with his tools like my father is, as he uses silence to teach me about accountability. He is aware of his alluring pull, untouched by power, like my mother is, as she relentlessly lends out a chain of compassion in times when we are all too wary of our own forgiveness. We succumb for our own good.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Shelf Life. This is Simran, and this is my podcast where we talk about books, their philosophies, but most importantly, our personal relationship with the book. And today we have another special guest. This is someone that I wanted to get on the podcast for the longest time. I think you were like in my top three for the people that I really, really wanted to get on the podcast. And I'm actually so glad that it's finally happened. Even amidst the lockdown, we've managed to do it. We've managed to get you here. And just how do you feel? How do you feel about being on the podcast?
I think just like one word to like encompass everything would be surreal, right? Because we've talked about it for so long, and yeah, it's finally happening, and it's happening on the day right after your birthday. So it is
Yeah.
super, super special.
Yeah. I mean, let's just I just completely forgot. I didn't do your introduction. So, to our listeners, this is the most amazing, the most wonderful Manasi Hegde.
Oh no, validation.
She is a writer, a poet. She is based in Mumbai, and she is studying English literature like me. So we talk about all the stories that you've heard about me bashing English literature, or just talking about my professors, everything. Basically, Mansi has seen all of that with me. She is party to all of the stories that you've heard on the podcast. So she is my best friend, and she also loves reading as much as I do. I mean, yeah, she does.
I don't think I compare, but
And I'm just so glad that you're here because we spoke about this all of yesterday. And to give our listeners a little bit of context, we have already spent, Mansi and I have spent an entire day just talking to each other. And and I'm not exaggerating, we have spent every second of the day talking to each other. And it's still not enough. It's not, I don't feel bored of you. I don't feel sick of you. And which is why I want people to know, like, I want our listeners to know everything that you have to say because they're genuinely amazing thoughts. And I want them to get to know you the way I get to know you. So
yes,
I'm just really glad
I'm
you're
going
here.
to try my best to sound as profound as possible. Yeah, but this is what happens when I spend, I don't know, 5 or 6 months away from you. It just has to all come out to
I
sort
know.
of make up for the lost time.
I know there's just so much that we have to cover up, and we just like pouring it all out. Anyway, what I was going to talk about. So now that we have you here, I was thinking about, we were both thinking about this. What do we have in common? What books have we read that we both love? And funnily enough, there was not a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I don't
And
know
who's
how.
to blame?
Oh, okay, okay. Says the one who doesn't have a podcast about books. Anyway, so we were talking about what we could do and which book we could get into, sink our teeth into, and we realized
And
that
then we realized that I've read 4 books in my entire lifetime.
that is not true. You
Mhm.
have read more, but you just don't give yourself enough credit for it. I
Okay.
genuinely feel that, and I've told you this so many times.
Mhm.
And it's one of the biggest problems I have with you is that you don't give yourself enough credit over the talent you have, over the kind of writer you are, everything. And I mean, for our listeners, we are going to be,
Turning
pulling
this
you.
into a therapy
Yeah, we're going to be
session.
pulling you into our love story because it is one for the books. So you are going to be in on it, and this is how it's going to be. This episode is going to be very, very personal,
All emo.
very, very
Get
emo.
your tissue boxes out.
Yes, definitely get your tissue boxes out. But it's going to be wonderful. And so we were talking about what books have we read? What do we like? What do we love? And we discovered that the one thing that we have always bonded over, and that we still talk about probably the most after just the random things that we talk about that are not worthy of being on the podcast, is poetry. We talk about spoken word poetry. And to those of our listeners who don't know, Mansi and I both perform spoken word poetry. Right, Mansi?
Yep, we try.
We try, that's true. We try. And so, Mansi, just tell us about your journey with spoken word poetry.
Right. Funny enough, and I'm trying to not flatter you right now, but yep, to our listeners right now, Simran was the one who introduced me to the whole concept, and now it's a little embarrassing to like trace back to my first time ever reading things I've written out to people, because I'm very shut, I think, in that sense. It's really, really hard for me to at least read out my work aloud. So I will give you immense credit for that. And yeah, I'm not too proud of my first attempt, but if you had nudged me in that direction, I don't think I would be so comfortable and so passionate about performing my own poetry today. So yeah, thanks to you.
And I feel so happy because I've seen you perform multiple pieces. I've seen you perform the same pieces a lot of times. And every time I tell you this a lot, like all the time, that you just keep getting better. And your writing gets better, your delivery gets better. And spoken word, for our listeners who don't know, is a form of performance poetry. So it's essentially when your poem doesn't really have the constraints of a structure and a meter and a rhyme and everything. It's not like your regular Shakespearean poems and all of that, you know. It's very contemporary, it's very modern. It's just someone talking about their day in a very poetic way. That's how I can put it. So yeah, and a lot of it is based on performance. A lot of it is based on the person, on the poet, and not the poetry. And I think that's what drew both of us to spoken word, right? What was it for you?
To me, the funny thing is, I would never, even though I express through my humor, I would never, while just having a conversation, I don't dramatize my thoughts, right? So in that sense, performing something that I've written, performing my thoughts would just, like, I wasn't too comfortable with the whole idea of it in the beginning. But I feel like after my first time ever reading things out, I started watching more performance poetry online, and then I just felt like maybe the whole act to me was a little too out there in comparison to my own personality. But then I realized maybe there isn't just one way of performing poetry, right? It sort of, your personality trickles into how you perform, and it doesn't always have to be loud and impactful in that sense, which struck to me, and I thought maybe I can perform my works the way I converse, maybe. And yeah, I felt like I've held on to that. So I don't think I'll ever be the kind of performer to be loud and impactful, but just soft and introspective. I don't know. Yeah, probably.
There's actually so much that I like about what you said right now. And like the first thing that I like is that you said that your poetry is basically dramatizing your thoughts. Which is so true. I totally understand that, and I love the way you put that. Poetry is dramatizing your thoughts. And we've seen it like happen so many times with so many poets, right? You take someone like Sylvia Plath, who
Mm-hmm.
dramatized literally every negative thought she had. You take someone like Virginia Woolf.
Mm-hmm.
You take any of the Hindi poets also, dramatizing their thoughts. And it's such a great outlet for just anything you're going through and everything you're going through. And that's what I want to talk about. Like, how did you meet spoken word as a format? How did you come about it? What got you to it? How did you maneuver through the whole journey, like, of discovering more art and then becoming a better artist yourself? How did you do that? Just what was it like?
Okay, to begin with, um, I think my first touch with spoken poetry was through YouTube, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly through button poetry. I'm hoping
Yeah.
most of you all out there would have heard of it. The artists that we began with were Sarah and Phil K. I think it's the same for both Simran and I. We've talked about this before. And yeah, that's the first moment that I ever realized that a thing like rhythm and meter existed, and you didn't just have to read out poetry like you would read out stories.
Mm.
There are pauses and there are tones, there's modulation, there's so much that goes on to
Mm.
it, and all of the nuances of performing it just build up together. So
Mm.
that was my first embrace with poetry. And it's funny that I know that we're similar as people, but it's funny that it was the same for both of us, right?
Yeah. That's a huge thing that we've both learned.
Yeah.
We don't have to be loud to be impactful.
Yeah, just the power of pauses is
Pauses, yeah.
insane.
Oh, the power of pauses. We're writing a poem right now. That's what we're doing.
It's a whole
So you
mood.
talked about Sarah and Phil K,
Yes.
and you want to talk about their poem that really struck you a little bit. You want to talk about that?
Mm-hmm. Maybe I can read out a
Yeah, you
snippet
can read
from
out
it.
some stuff.
Okay. I'm hoping some of you all would end up looking this up too. So, the poem's titled When Love Arrives, and I'm going to be reading out a snippet from it. Love disappeared, slowly, like baby teeth, losing parts of me I thought I needed. Love vanished, like an amateur magician. Everyone could see the trapdoor but me, like a flat tire. There were other places I had planned on going, but my plans didn't matter. Love stayed away for years, and when love finally reappeared, I barely recognized him. Maybe love stays. Maybe love can't. Maybe love shouldn't.
That's so beautiful. I remember the first time I heard this poem, and again I heard it on Button Poetry on YouTube, and it was just so perfect.
Mm-hmm.
That was it was just perfect. It was performed perfectly, and everything about the words, everything about the message was just so beautiful. And there's another one that we really wanted to bring into attention for our viewers, for our listeners, and that one is
By Siaara Freeman, and it's
yeah.
titled The Drug Dealer's Daughter. And I feel like the title is very much hinting at how impactful the piece is going to be
Mm,
anyway.
yeah.
But maybe.
Okay, before you get into it,
Mhm.
tell me what did you connect with the most about this poem?
Um, remember how I spoke about just your personality seeping into
Your
how you
poetry.
perform and what you
Hmm.
write about? This is the best example of it because I
Yeah,
know that she is linking it to her own
own life.
backstory, her own life, her own struggles. And the way that she performs it, you can't, even if you have no sort of connection with that kind of life and those kind of struggles, you will still end up relating to the emotion of it
Mm,
because
yeah,
it's so deep seated for her.
yeah.
So maybe I can quote
Yep, go ahead.
quote her. And the funny thing is, when Simran and I end up listening to poetry, and I've written about this in another piece that I've written for
Yeah.
her, The funny thing about us is that we end up sighing at the same
At the
verses
same verses. Every time.
every time. And it's not just because we spend so much time together and we end up becoming like each other. It's just that we have the same thoughts and we have the
Yeah.
same,
I wouldn't like becoming like you. I wouldn't mind becoming like you.
because in many ways we are.
Yeah, I do feel like you're an extension of myself. You're just an annoying person that lives inside my head.
And I'm funny.
But like, we can, I don't know,
Yeah.
we will talk about that.
So let's just loop back to what we were talking
Yeah.
about. Yeah, to quote the piece, she calls herself and says, I am a dark alley that no one would enter alone.
Beautiful.
And when she talks about just living as a black woman, living in the black culture, she talks about the hood life. And she says, the hood is magic that turns black men into myths.
Amazing. That's the line that I love too.
Mhm.
Yeah. You mentioned Siaara Freeman, and you mentioned about, her experiences becoming her poems. And just her life transforming into a poem. And we do that. We do that regularly, all the time with our pieces. We only write about, mostly what we understand, right? I mean, your pieces, you want to talk about them a little bit? Some of your pieces, just
Oh
read some out for us.
Okay. I feel like this might disappoint you guys, but at the end of the day, we do become cliches as much as we try to run away from it.
Yes.
So, just to give you a little context, my first piece was about, my love, if I can put it that way. Yeah, and it's the only piece that I've ever performed the 6 or 7 times that I have performed. And it's about my biggest learning from life, because
Till now.
till now the biggest lessons in life do not come from the most comfortable of places. And I didn't think I would ever write a sob story, but this sort of did turn out like one. And there is something happy to be picked up from it too, but it is circled around my biggest lesson. And it's the
Which
only
was not
piece-
comfortable.
Yeah, and it is
Yeah.
the only piece that I've performed. So it is true.
And the piece is called Japanese Denim. I'm hoping one of these days you're gonna put it out, but I think you should perform it a little bit more, because
Yes.
I love, again, we've spoken about this, but when you perform a piece and you connect with an audience, the physical connection, and you see how they react, you see what is happening to them when they listen to what you're saying. It's just, you can't replace it. You can't replace that feeling.
The euphoria of being on a stage.
I swear, I miss that. Anyway, so that's what we talked about. Manasi talked about her poems and how she writes them, and I want to get the listeners a little more into the world of spoken word poetry and just the different types of writers that exist. And there are writers who write specifically about their personal experiences. So there's, for example, a poet called Sabrina Benaim. If y'all have heard of her, great job. You guys are doing your homework. But if you haven't, you should definitely check her out. Her name is Sabrina Benaim, and she's also the author of a book. I guess she has a collection of poetry out. And a specific poem that I want to mention is a poem called How to Fold a Memory. And it's one of those poems that really make you think. And not, again, for the reason that you understand that this is coming from someone's actual life. This is coming from someone's direct soul, is how I like to put it. And I think she has another line here somewhere, where it says, oh yeah, it says, I remember the shape of my hand held in yours, like origami prayer, like flower petals returning home. I remember the rose petals falling from your fingers, leading from the bedroom to the doorway, like a trail of breadcrumbs or drops of blood. And it's so beautiful, and that's what I love about most of the spoken word poetry that's out there, the attention to detail. Where do I even begin with the attention to detail? The magic in finding ordinary things powerful, and the magic in the ordinary things, and do you find, like, do you think that you do that a lot in your life as a result of being a poet?
A lot, a lot.
Yeah,
A
I know
lot.
that you do. I mean, I've seen it.
I mean, I feel like my strongest trait as a writer
Mm-hmm.
is how descriptive I can get, and
Mm.
I'm not just boasting, if I can put it that way. It's
Yeah.
just a result of how all of the feedback that I do get too.
Mm.
I feel like that might just be my strongest trait.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I know this, and I'm gonna bring it up that you have written a piece which is one of my favorite pieces, and the one that was in the beginning of this episode is actually, that was an excerpt from one of Manasi's pieces called "With You for You," right? And that entire piece is about you at a concert, isn't it?
Yes,
And it's just that it's you at a concert, you observing this man who's performing, and you wrote an entire piece on it. And I have so much stuff like that. Like, this one time I was traveling in a train, and there was this young girl, like a child, who was sitting right in front of me, and she was just holding a flower the entire 1 hour train ride, and just like caressing it and not looking at anything else. Her eyes were on the flower.
That's
She
beautiful.
didn't move. And I don't know what happened, but I felt like I wanted to write a poem about her. And I kind of did. And that is just the fact that we are able to observe.
Everything is poetry.
Oh, of course. Everything is for the art. Please bear with all of my emotions while I dump them on you. Bear with them. It's for my art. Anyway, let's move on to another poet that we love. And it's a poet named... Oh my god, I'm getting chills just thinking about him. This is someone that Manasi and I have fangirled over for so long. And we had the privilege and the honor to see him live.
Oh no.
What a wonderful night that was. And we saw him live, we saw him perform, and he blew us away. He shattered my entire heart. The man that we're talking about is Rudy Francisco, right, Manasi?
Yes, so.
And he has some really, really wonderful poems. And he's based in San Diego. And I don't know how long he's been performing, but he definitely has a collection of poetry online. And it's a book that he's released. It's called Helium. So if you want to check out just the book, you can do that. But there's also a lot of stuff of him performing on Button Poetry and a lot of other sites. So you can definitely check that out. And is there a specific poem that you want to talk about with Rudy? You want to get into that first?
I think I'll let you start and then you can come back to me.
Of course. The guest and their demands. So I want to talk about my favorite Rudy Francisco poem. And again, this is a writer who does take a lot from his personal experiences. But again, he is a writer who has so many metaphors that just fall into place. And it's more metaphors than they are words, than there are sentences.
And the pace that he
Oh.
throws it at you.
Oh yeah, the pace.
You are just struggling to keep up. Because
Yeah.
basically your brain is trying to process the beauty of one metaphor and four more are coming your way.
Yeah. And that's how you know a good writer, when you want them to stop but you also don't want them to stop.
Mm.
You want them to stop because you want to know, okay, just go back to that line. I love that. But you don't want them to stop because please give me more. And yeah, that's how I feel when you perform too. Just saying.
Oh no.
And yeah, I want to talk about a poem called A Lot Like You. So I don't think we have enough time to read out the entire thing. So I'm just going to read a couple of lines that I really, really like. And A Lot Like You is actually about Rudy Francisco is talking about his future wife. He's talking about how he doesn't really know what his wedding would look like. He's never pictured it, he's never fantasized about it, but he has fantasized about his future wife. And he knows exactly what she's going to be like. And so, you know, he talks about this one woman, and I guess she exists, right? Like, by the end of the poem, we realize that she does. But the way he talks about her, he says, someone who doesn't smell like a band-aid drenched in lonely. Someone who is more than a temporary solution to the empty side of the bed. To be honest, I don't know what tux I'll be wearing. I have no idea what my wedding will look like. But I imagine the woman who pins my last name to hers will butterfly down the aisle like a 5-foot promise. I imagine that her smile will be so big that you will see it on Google Maps and know exactly where our wedding is being held. The woman that I plan to marry will have champagne in her walk, and I will get drunk on her footsteps. Can you imagine getting drunk on someone's footsteps? Just the idea of that.
I mean, if you aren't out there listening to this and nodding away, then I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah. In fact, one of my another favorite lines from this poem is where he says that he's again describing his future wife, and he says she can make a atheist believe in God just long enough to say God damn. What a superb line.
And his weight.
Yeah, his wit. You want to talk about another favorite of ours? One that we both actually bonded over, one that we mutually liked, and it's called The Heart and the Fist. Do you want to talk about why we like it a little bit?
And let me just put out that it doesn't get better than this, and I think you can count on our opinion. This might just be his best piece out there.
Could be, yeah. I definitely think it's his best. Yeah, it's really powerful, and the entire the concept of the whole piece is that you take something destructive, and with the way of art, you make it into something that saves people. So he is essentially talking about what he's talking about is that he takes this example of how a rifle in a foreign country, I guess he's talking about
Mexican
Mexico.
government,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. So he talks about the Mexican government and how they used a rifle to make a violin, and he uses that example and he connects that to so many other things, like just the heart and the fist, and how do you make a heart out of a fist. And what was the line about the graveyard?
That the difference between
The difference between a graveyard and a garden is what you decide to put in it. What
put
a line.
into the ground.
Put into the ground. Yeah. And what is the one about the weapon that we loved?
A weapon will always be a weapon, but we choose how to fight the war.
How do you choose to fight the war? And you know what? This week, I'm going to let the listeners off with this line. How do you choose to fight your wars? What weapons do you use? And how do you use them? Do you make a heart out of your fist? And Mansi, if you want to just, before we get into the last aspect of our poetry episode, because we kind of are running out of time a little bit, if you want to just read out the last one of the few lines that you loved from The Heart and the Fist.
Even the most destructive instrument can still create a melody.
Worth dancing to.
And sometimes, don't we also call that a battle?
Mm. And you know, this idea of war and battles and just guns and all of these things that we associate with toxic masculinity, all of these things being, you know, used for something like music and poetry and weaving that into poetry, what a beautiful thing to do. I wish we could all do that. I mean, that's what we're trying to do, right? Like, as poets and writers, that is the aim, to turn something painful or uncomfortable into beautiful.
And the whole idea, like he talks about it, to move people without terrorizing them.
Yes, that's another one of his lines, which is beautiful. And you know, there's so much more that I want to talk to Mansi about, but we genuinely are running out of time, and we have to wrap this up. So, to wrap up, we decided that we would actually read out a Rudy Francisco poem, because this is one that, you know, we want to send it out to all the writers who might be listening, all the poets who might be listening, you know, everybody who's just ever wanted to write. We want to dedicate this specifically to you guys, because this is a poem that made us want to write, you know, and it still makes us want to write whenever we're feeling a rut, whenever we're feeling down, it makes us want to write. And you want to talk about it a little bit, Mansi? You want to just explain why you love it, and before you get into reading it out loud?
So, the piece is titled I Wanna Write a Poem, and if there is a piece that explains the whole ambition of being a writer, this is it.
Yeah, that's true. And even the struggles of being a writer. Some days it's not easy, but you still do it because it's worth it, right? So read it out for us a little bit. Read the poem out for us.
I want to write a poem, but I want to say what you're thinking. I want to patch up the holes when your boat starts sinking. I want to write that one-of-a-kind poem, that free your mind poem, that I like how you made that rhyme poem, that I like that last line poem, that can I hear that one more time, that is if you don't mind poem. I want to write that so heartfelt, I think I know him poem, that this is so tight I gotta go find all of my friends so I can show them poem. I want to write about everything that I've ever wanted to be. I want to write a poem so beautiful that my parents might actually start to agree. I want to write about you, about me, about us, about everything from cars and trains to riding the bus to the trailer, and trust the mistakes and heartaches. I want to talk about when I first learned to drive and I was so scared to let my foot off the brake. I want to talk about battles, about wars, about victories and losses, about ethnic cleansing, genocide, and laws penetrated by burning crosses that burned down churches. I want husbands to thank my poems for the heart that they stole. And I know that this is just some shameless attempt to petrify my soul, but honestly, I don't want to be forgotten. I don't need fame. I don't need fortune. I just want people to know what I stood for and why I came. I refuse to die a mere occupant of the earth. A John Doe, yet another faceless man out there with no name. I refuse to be just some other man. I want to walk for centuries and leave my footprints in the sand for the world to see. I want to be cremated into ashes of rhymes and poetry. I'm just feeling like one day they're gonna love me. I don't share my emotions too often. Poetry will allow me to die with my heart on my sleeve. They never saw me coming. but I'll make sure they grieve when I leave.
When I leave. So perfect. And it's just, there's nothing more to say. I mean, it's just the perfect way to end this episode. And I'm honestly so glad you're here, Manasi. And this was just so perfect. And there's a lot of your poems on your Instagram, right? Where can people find you? If they want to read your poem.
Maybe just for you guys, I'll make a post of my best pieces, and you
Yes.
can always drop a link down there.
We would love that. Our listeners would love that. So if you want to find Manasi and you want to find some of her poems, and I recommend that you do because they are beautiful, you can always head to her Instagram. And it's what's your account name?
Let me spell this out to you. It's MANC_Hegde, so it's HEGDE.
Yes, it's Manasi Hegde. I can't wait to have you back. And this was lovely. We talked about what we love, and we talked about how much I love you, which is also great. And yeah, thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me here, and thank you for everyone listening. It means so much to
Yeah,
her and
and
to me too today.
oh my god, I completely forgot. We forgot the question of our podcast. We forgot to ask Manasi the question that we ask everybody and every episode. Why do you think so? Usually the question is, why do you think this story is told? Which is in relation to whatever book we've discussed. But since this time we discussed spoken word poetry. And I know that you absolutely love I Want to Write a Poem that we just discussed. Why do you think that poem was written?
I think that poem was written just to reach out to people of a similar kind.
Yeah, just like a cute tribute. Yeah, I think so too. I want to believe that. Like a friend you don't really know, but always is going through what you're going through.
And all its truth lies in the fact that he has reached out to us.
Yes, he has. So Rudy, if you're listening to this, hopefully you are. Please know that you have moved us and you have changed us. And thank you to everybody that we've read, every artist that we've seen. And we promise that we're going to make so much more of this, right? Both of us.
So much.
So much. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. Thank you for listening. And we hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you, Manasi, for coming. And I will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Now I'm all alone in the